On behalf of the Campaign for Independent Britain, welcome to this meeting that we've organised to inform you about a rather sinister organisation. I was thinking of chairing this meeting, but we have a guest from one of our sister organisations, the Freedom Association, Roger Helmer, who is the chairman of that association, as well as being an MEP for the East Midlands region. Unlike most MEPs, he sees it as his job to represent his constituents to the European institutions and not the other way around. And he's going to be taking up the chairing of the meeting, so I'll ask him to do so now.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for that, Edward. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for turning out on a wonderful sunny day when you may well have been wanting to sit in the garden by the pool. I'm delighted to see you here. And let me first of all thank Edward for inviting me to come and chair this meeting. Although I'm Freedom Association and Edward is Campaign for Independent Britain, I think we see eye to eye on a huge range of issues and have in the past cooperated on many points, and I have no doubt will continue to cooperate in the future. If I may just mention very briefly, I brought a few bits and pieces with me, including a video, a DVD, which is over there if you would like to have it. I've brought a postcard, which is Where's Our Referendum postcard, and it contains a request for you to send to your MP, asking your MP to vote in the House of Commons for a referendum on the European Constitution. And I've also brought my favourite bumper sticker, and as a member of the European Parliament I feel I have to tell people to love Europe, but if you fold it out the whole distance it says love Europe, hate the EU. There are only a few of them over there, but if you're prepared to put them on your bumper, please take one while there are still some there. Now, I'm looking forward very much to hearing our speaker this afternoon, Brian Gerrish, who is sitting right here with me, because he's going to be talking about an organisation. We're being very coy about this and not mentioning the name because we don't want to steal your thunder, Brian, but it's an organisation that I have heard lots of references to, but I don't pretend to know a great deal about. So I hope I'm going to learn a great deal today, and perhaps you will as well. That would be an excellent thing. Now, a bit of background. Brian, I've got to read this because I've got to get my details right, haven't I? Brian is a former naval officer and submarine warfare expert, and it says here, like in The Hunt for Red October. I don't think you're actually in the movie, but that's the sort of career that Brian has followed. So he's the sort of chap who knows what he's talking about. And together with his colleagues throughout the country, he's conducted detailed research into this organisation, which seeks to identify the, quotes, leaders of tomorrow, to inculcate a common ideology and encourage them to network with each other across their various departments and agencies. This organisation is now recruiting in schools, but is active in, guess what, the BBC, in the National Health Service, in local government, and also in police forces, regional government structures, which, as you know, many of us want to get rid of, in the armed forces, in government departments, communications, media and industry. And it has a strong Europhile, pro-EU, pro-Brussels bias. Brian and his colleagues will conduct a vigorous campaign in Plymouth, from which I conclude, sir, that you're coming from Plymouth. Indeed. What better place for a naval officer to come from? Relentlessly exposing the questionable dealings of the local council, public-private partnerships with other agencies, many of whose officers are graduates of the organisation. And Brian, we are told, is going to name names. What we will do is we'll invite Brian to address us. We will then call on you to contribute to questions and a debate about this situation, and we will aim to wrap up, and I think we're looking at wrapping up by 4 o'clock. Okay, unless we completely run out of questions, in which case we may run out. We may wrap up by 3:30. Good. So with that, I will pass the floor, as we say. The floor doesn't actually move, but it's the term that's normally used in the Parliament. I will pass the floor and also the microphone to Brian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roger. Right, I shall stand up because that always makes me feel better. Thank you all very much for coming. I'm going to give you a talk on an organisation. I've got a presentation which is getting bigger, and that's a bit of a problem in some ways because there's more and more information which I'd like to get across, but you can only do so much at a time. So I've presented it in a particular way, but what I'm going to talk about is what is happening in this country and why some of the things are happening. And I think you're going to be surprised at some of the things that I show you. And when we've gone through it, I hope you're going to ask me a lot of questions. I want you to challenge me and see what my answers are. Okay, so the more questions I get, the happier I will be. And once we've done that, we can probably start to have a look at what we do about the situation, because I believe that if we take some different actions to the ones that we've been taking over the last few years, we will get a different result. This is the problem, the European Union. Europe is fine, the people in Europe are fine, but the political organisation is very bad. In fact, it's evil. And I use that word deliberately. Now, we hope the technology is going to work, but it's been playing around a little bit for me. We're going to do a little bit of a talk on the hunt for Red October. I don't know how many of you have read the book or seen the film, but it was about a big submarine. And it was in the good old days when we knew who the baddies were. At that stage, the baddies were the Russians and the good guys were NATO, and that made life fairly easy. But I think that now times have changed. The subject's a serious one, because while we're able to visit the pub and have a beer, which I did before we started, there are young men and women dying overseas. This was a photograph taken in Iraq, but we know that the same thing's happening in Afghanistan. So whilst we can be very comfortable in this country, there are young service people giving their lives overseas for their queen and country. And whilst they are dying overseas, I believe that others are doing some very despicable things within this country, and I'm going to take the lid off that a little bit. This is a key part. Have you noticed that nothing seems to work in the country at the moment? It doesn't matter where you go, things are not right in schools, in the NHS, in the police, judiciary. I hear more and more people saying something along the lines of, I don't know what's going on, but something is because something weird's happening. And that's generally as far as they get. And then there are probably people like yourselves who are better informed. But a lot of people are saying that the country doesn't work. There are other funny things happening. I'm going to flick through this sequence very quickly, but I became interested as to why the press was suddenly very interested with Hitler. This is the Daily Mail. But after not seeing much of this gentleman for a large number of years, he's popping up in newspapers with monotonous regularity. There are some other things going on. This dates from 2005, but by the end of 2005, there'd been more attacks on Jewish property and persons in UK than ever before, and perhaps that's a bit of a worrying trend. We've got some interesting people involved with Nazi or fascist policies and people, and this is a picture ringed which appeared again, I think, in the Mail, but showing Prince Philip attending funerals of relatives. And I don't know whether that raises any questions in your mind, but it raised a few questions in my mind. This is the Daily Mail again, a big article about 7,000 SS men who were allowed to stay in England. I'm not commenting much further, only that I find it very strange that we now seem to have articles and pictures almost glorifying the Nazi regime. But perhaps I'm mistaken. Now, if we talk about an enemy, it's a bit blurred, that one. I'm sorry, I've lost a little bit of definition on some of the pictures, but that is the ocean